Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. Free agency has begun, and you know what that means? The Strus is loose, baby! Joining me today to discuss the start of the free agency for the Cleveland Cavaliers is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. My OBS completely froze up throughout that whole intro, so I have no idea what our listeners are going to get to see or hear. But you know, saddle up, Seabiscuit. We evened up in time to actually talk about basketball.
That's the important thing as well. And you know what? The intro's in there for audio. I was a little confused looking at the black screen, but you know what? Shaky start, but we're going to pull it together. Carter, how you doing, buddy? I'm excited to talk about this. You know, we had said that we kind of expected the Cavs to get aggressive in free agency. This is a front office that's routinely been aggressive. This is a team that I think has made it pretty clear that they have serious aspirations when it comes to their long-term goals. And this is, you know, a team that appears to have gone very creative and found some ways to improve this team in ways that I think are meaningful.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm glad we can talk about it. We're finally joining the party, you know? And now that these signings are official, you know, the ink is drying. Might not be dry yet. Cavs might use DocuSign. Who's to say? But either way, I'm feeling really, really excited about what the team did because there's stuff to quibble with, and I think we're going to talk about some of those things as we go through this podcast. But the number one thing I wanted out of this offseason, you can go back and listen on the record. All I wanted was for this team to address the obvious stuff first and make it so we could have a better evaluation of the coaching staff, of the core four, of Evan Mobley. And I think they've done that. It is now, with the additions of Niang, Strus, and even Jerome, who is another player who fits, who I'm excited about that we can jump into. I feel like they have added rotation bodies that will make minutes very competitive. They've added shooting that will, you know, make things spaced in a legitimate way. I mean, we talked all last season about how Jetty just kind of getting hot sometimes, the way that changed the game for the team, and they added a couple, maybe the two best shooters in free agency. So, you know, I'm very, very excited. I think there's stuff to quibble with here. I think there's some questions that still need to be answered. But overall, I think Kobe Altman aggressively did the easy stuff in a weird way. You know, like I think you could have been, for an asset poor team, it would have been easy just to use them mid-level and walk away. But I think they did a really nice job of using what assets they had to address clear needs. So I'm stoked. I'm really excited to see what this team would look like. Justin, at no point last season, especially with Kevin Love slumping, could this team throw out three bona fide shooters at the same time that teams would panic if they were left wide open. I would venture to say 27 other teams could say that they could do that, and the Cavs couldn't while they won 51 games. So I'm just so excited to see what optionality this gives them heading into next season, and kind of how their presence will be the tide that raises the boats for the Cavs' best players.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think, you know, when you talk about, you know, looking at the start of free agency, which I honestly, like, you look at the moves that have been made, the amount of kind of options that the Cavs had to play with to begin with, I wouldn't be surprised if we're pretty much done for the offseason. Like, this is quite a few guys that you feel comfortable having in the rotation, and it's the type of moves that we were hoping for, right? The rotation pieces that you can put around the core to, as you said, better evaluate both the coaching staff as well as the core that this Cavs team has. And I think you got to give credit to Kobe Altman for, you know, getting creative. We have to own up to a mistake on my part, or I have to own up to a mistake on my part, where I said you couldn't do sign and trade as well as use the mid-level exception. Still getting my feet wet.
I'll tell you what, we might not be cap experts.
We might not be cap experts, but finding a way to get the Max Strus deal done, who you and I both agreed that was our top target going into free agency, got that deal done. And your backup target was to not use the mid-level exception, but to split it. And the number one guy you named was Bang Bang Niang, man. And look who is on the Cleveland Cavaliers. George Niang, very excited to have the minivan on this team. But I think for Kobe to, make another move, to add another guard, a big 6'5" guard, so that you have a rotation where, I mean, depending on whether or not you're using Ricky Rubio, if certain nights you're using Ty Jerome instead of Ricky Rubio, or if he earns that spot over Ricky, the only players you will be playing under 6'5" are Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. That's a type of option that you didn't really have last season. And so I think Kobe deserves a lot of credit, and I think ownership deserves a lot of credit. To Cavs chairman Dan Gilbert, to continue to spend, to continue to be aggressive, to empower Kobe to make these type of moves. I think that this is another confirmation that this organization is serious about trying to contend. And as we look west to, Portland falling apart, one of the reasons that didn't work out was because, they kind of got complacent multiple times, right? Multiple times throughout that Lillard window. It was, all right, we're fine with the guys we have here. We don't really need to make any moves. Let's just solely rely on internal growth. Whereas the Cavs, they've been aggressive. They made a swing to add Donovan Mitchell and to accelerate the timeline, to accelerate the expectations. It didn't work out at the trade deadline. You saw some reports that Philly turned down 2 second-round picks at the deadline for George Niang from the Cavs, right? Like, we know that the Cavs were being aggressive. Kobe said he was being aggressive at the deadline, and the options just weren't there. But now you have, you retain Karis LeVert, which we probably should have mentioned by now, on a 2-year deal, and added multiple rotation players. I just feel a whole lot better about how healthy this rotation can be. And I love the fact that there's actually going to be competition for minutes because there are viable options.
Yeah, both the reported term and number for Karis felt really, really good. I think that there was some concerns that, the Cavs had given up a fair amount of leverage by not trading him at the deadline and going into free agency, kind of knowing that as an over the cap team, you were going to need to find a way to, or projected to be over the cap team, you're probably going to have to find a way to hold on to that salary slot for flexibility moving forward. And the fact that they were able to come to a great deal for both sides, that's really, really exciting because I thought Karis, showed a lot in that postseason run. I still have some quibbles about the fit, but I'm quibbling a lot less when you can put a Max Strus in lineups with him, a Georges Niang in lineups with him that kind of allow him to play his game a little bit more freely. Yeah. We talk about the value that shooting will add for our stars, and obviously that's going to be there. I've talked a lot about how Darius and Donnie, whenever they were staggered, whenever one was playing and one was sitting, they were the only shooter on the floor. And because the other one was sitting, they were the only creator on the floor. Right. That was an elite creator. Obviously, Karis is a good creator. But, they were going to be handed the keys to the offense when they're alone. So, yes, obviously, they're going to have more room to operate with. Teams are going to not be able to shade as heavy. All that fun stuff. I don't think enough is being discussed on Twitter right now and among the fan base about how much easier this makes the role players' lives. Karis LeVert, with a spaced floor and a pick and roll, has shown he really can make an impact as a play initiator. His reads are solid, not elite. So when you give him clearer sight lines, I think you're going to get a better result. Isaac Okoro went from being a guy, because of the lineups he's playing in, pretty much exclusively had to function as a spacer. And when he did cut to the rim, he often was cutting into congested space unless, the shape of the play allowed otherwise. If he's in lineups with Max Strus and Georges Niang, well, all of a sudden it's going to be a lot easier for him to be lurking around the dunker spot or setting screens. So I just think, writ large, they just so desperately needed shooting. This is what I talked about at the deadline. And part of the reason I was so disappointed they didn't make a deal at the deadline, which is because I just have felt that adding bona fide shooting, that bona fide volume shooting that defenses actually really respect and fear, was going to have that Channing Frye in 2016 effect, where once they traded for him, it was like, oh, this is way harder for teams to deal with. And I think they have that optionality now. Yeah, I just think shooting is the one skill. Shooting is really one of the only skills in the basketball court that just by existing helps everyone.
Yeah, I totally
and they've
agree.
added that.
Yep, I agree. And speaking of Channing Frye in 2016, this was a fun little fact from DH in our Discord. We're definitely dealing with some sticker shock when we look at the contracts in today's NBA right now. But if you look at the percentage of the cap that Max Strus got signed for, and Karis LeVert reportedly is around kind of the same annual value, that is less of a percentage of the cap than Channing Frye got paid in 2016 when they won the championship. And it is less. It's slightly more than Iman Shumpert the following year in 16-17, and slightly below what JR was being paid in that year, right? And like that's just goes to show you, right? Like it's going to take us a while to get used to that. But I think that you look at the reported terms, they look like what you pay role guys, right? This is what you pay either bench players, which Chris Fedor mentioned, Karis LeVert took a pay cut. I think he would have been one of the best free agent options out there just because free agency has been...
The wing market was very narrow. Poor Kelly Oubre is still floating in the ether right now.
Dude, honestly, free agency, I think in general has just kind of been nerfed with this new CBA. Like we do not see stars hit free agency almost ever at this point. That was kind of what you hear, right? Like Adam Silver, what they wanted to achieve is we're now at a point where, free agents don't hit, or stars don't hit free agency. If teams are going to lose a star, it's going to be for compensation. It's a lot of kind of trades, a lot of sign and trades, a lot of ways to figure things out. But you look at what those guys are getting paid and you feel really good about it. And I also feel really good looking back at the contract that Jared Allen's on. Like that looks like an incredibly valuable deal at this point. It's not much more than TT was being paid in those dollars back then. And you look at some of the contracts that were signed. Vucevic, same reported value. Jakob Poeltl, who is one of the guys that we mentioned, hey, you could probably, you could sign a Jakob Poeltl and get 80% of the production for, a fraction of the cost. Same contract over the same term, right? Like, I think that is such a good value contract. And the Cavs are now in a position where if they have to make adjustments down the road, you have these rotation players on movable deals. I hate talking about players this way, and you hope that everyone you sign works out with you. But having that optionality really matters in today's NBA. So I think that they did a really good job giving themselves depth as well as, contracts that you can work with.
Yeah, and here's the thing that's also worth noting while we're talking about the money side of things. And obviously, all these numbers are just reported. We're still, we're always kind of in the ether on this sort of stuff. They're not a tax team right now. Like, they are not in the luxury tax with Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Max Strus, Georges Niang, Evan Mobley, all signed this year and next.
Yeah.
And
Ricky Rubio.
Yeah, and Rubio signed this year and next.
And so, Dean Wade on a valuable deal. Yes. They kept Dean Wade.
Yeah, so they are not remotely close to that, because that second tax apron is going to scare teams, and it should. It is crazy prohibitive. And there's a reason why you're going to see, I think the price for stars is going to get deflated by that second apron on the trade market even. I think teams are going to be pretty darn wary before trading for $60 million of Dame Lillard in his age 36 season as a result of that. So the fact that this team with this talent level is not a tax team yet, yes, Donovan Mitchell is going to be due for a big fat extension here in the next couple years.
Can't wait for it.
Evan Mobley is gonna get a nice payday. But also, you got to remember, guys, new TV deals coming. Cap should be jumping. We don't know for sure, obviously, but I think they're in a really, really good place from a cap management perspective, and so that's why I think this is where we'll talk about some quibbles. Strus, I thought Strus at the mid level was it's a little risky. He runs a little hot and cold. He got more than mid-level, reportedly. Niang, I thought, maybe half your mid-level. He got a little bit more than half. So, like, I think there were some gulfs in the actuals and the values that are being reported out there, but that does not in any way, undercut how excited I am. Because, like, for the Cavs, that $2 to $4 million a year per player is just not that meaningful in how they're going to operate moving forward. And I like the players.
Right. That's a vet minimum. Like, would you rather, sign a lesser player that addresses fewer of your needs to basically, like, would you swap a vet minimum contract out to upgrade that position? I would. I if it means keeping an empty roster spot for the rest of the season, even just to stay below that luxury tax, I am comfortable with that, because I think the guys that they added are meaningful upgrades. And I think this is the time where we should probably kind of transition into what these guys are actually bringing. Before we get to that, though, I do think we need to kind of say goodbye to both Cedi Osman and Lamar Stevens. I think Lamar was a great, actually both of these guys really are great player development stories. Cedi was a draft and stash guy, took him a couple years to come over. Remember, he was a guy that did not really have a jumper when he first came over to the Cavs, and that was something that they worked year over year to develop. Obviously we've talked about many times him being in and out of the lineup and, responding to the criticism. And, I think he deserves a lot of credit. I think Lamar, his willingness to always stay ready and step in at times. I think we should definitely kind of mention them at least as, departing members of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah. Cedi was the longest tenured member of the team. Which is crazy, and yes, it is Darius now, which is perhaps crazier. It's obviously you're gonna miss him. You're gonna miss, in terms of the on-court stuff, you're gonna miss Cedi's kind of chaos that he could bring. His speed and transition, his size. That's a thing that if you're gonna quibble with the way the roster looks right now, Cedi was their only 6'7" plus wing. That was a true wing. Lamar, obviously, you're going to miss the fact that JB could turn to him and go, "Hey, Lamar, the starters are pissing me off. Go play hard, please, and shame them." So you are going to miss that kind of stuff. There's no way around it. But with that said, I still think like the team is going to be they're going to miss them. But ultimately, like, I think these are the moves that they kind of need to make. They needed to shake things up. My offseason goal was two no doubt rotation players with a third, maybe that person could sneak in. And I think they've definitely checked box one. We'll see if they end up checking box two with any of their other additions. But
really? You don't have Jerome in that? Hey, maybe you could sneak in.
I think he could. I just don't know if he will. That's kind of my question.
That's kind of the whole defining concept behind the word "could."
Well, shut up. Yeah. So I'm just really excited and interested to see how this team is going to work together. Should we dive in and just start breaking down these dudes and talk about their games? Because I still think there's a lot. We've got a lot to learn still.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you mentioned it before, like the disappointment we had that the Cavs weren't able to find a move at the deadline. A shooter like Max Strus was the type of guy that we had wanted to see the Cavs add. And the fact that it only cost them 1 second-round pick, so they still have second-round picks to mess around with in the future. For the record, that's the LA Lakers 2026 second-round pick that they moved. And you retained Karis LeVert, I think, is a big win. Obviously, Max Strus, we talked about it on the last podcast. 4th percentile in terms of how open his shots are. This guy has legitimate gravity. And I think more importantly, he has something that you had mentioned that you wanted to see, Carter, when you were watching the playoffs, which is a willingness to fire away on those contested three-pointers, those, moderately open shots that we would have complained about during the year. Well, they were contested looks. Max Strus is willing to pull off of all of those shots. He's willing to pull coming off of screens, which I think is a big, big difference when you're talking about the difference between he and Jetty Osman. Like, even though he's playing with probably now the two best playmakers he's played with in Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, I don't necessarily expect a massive jump in the openness of his shots, because he's still going to have a lot of those off-screen actions where guys are coming up to the level, but he's coming off that screen already thinking, I'm going to shoot, I'm going to take this shot, and he makes those at a high level. 32% of his scoring opportunities last year came off of a screen, which is in the 96th percentile. You look at Jetty Osman, only 13% of his shots came off of screens. We saw it time and time again where he would come off a ball screen, a dribble handoff, and because the defender was coming up to the level, he hesitates. He passes the ball off to another guard. If we're late in the shot clock, it's going to lead to an isolation possession. The defense gets the chance to reset and go down into rebounding position. Those opportunities will not be there because Max Strus is such a willing shooter. So I think adding a movement shooter is a big deal. Sorry to continue my rant here, Carter. I will let you speak in a minute. We had talked about his shooting splits last year, right? In terms of how he was shooting. I thought it would be fun to take an average of the last two seasons, because last year, even though he profiled as a better shooter than Jetty, when you look at those ratings, it was still a down year for him overall. But if you look at the average from the last two seasons, 3-point percentage, 38%. Pull-up threes, 34.1. Catch and shoot, 38.7. Above the break threes, he shot 34.4%. And from the corners, 47.2% from three, man. He's shot 45% last year, 49% the year before. This guy is money from the corners.
Yeah. I think that all this is spot on. You did all the research and work, so you get to rant and ramble just a little bit. It's
really the only reason I do research is because I just love to hear myself talk.
And God bless you for it. But yeah, I think that the one thing I'll note, really smart relocator. That's one of my favorite things. And I so specifically remember, I think it was a Tony Pesta tweet, kind of just breaking down 2 or 3 plays in the Knicks series where Jetty, if he just relocated, if he had just slid over 5 or 6 steps on a drive, he would have been wide open for a 3, but stayed where he was. And let his man help while not, actually really working himself open. Strus is going to be able to do that for you. I think he's got enough on-ball juice to attack a closeout. I think he's not going to be as dynamic of an attacker as Jetty. I think Jetty's a little better with the ball in his hands. But the fact is that I think you can trust him to make the right play, and because teams are flying at him with such reckless abandon most of the time, he's gonna get easier rim attacks than Jetty got. So even if I remember we talked about this with Steph Curry. Obviously, Strus is not nearly the shooter Steph is. No one is. But I remember we talked about
you just got Lima. You just got Lima ready to attack another.
I know he's mad already. But I remember people would talk about how Steph is one of the great finishers at point guard of his era, and I'm like, I mean, statistically, yeah, but he's getting wide open layups because people are flying at him. Yeah, and so afraid of the 3 that they're letting the drive up, and I think Strus is going to have that. I did want to note to your point about kind of playoff shooting and about still having to take tightly contested shots. I think the idea of they're not going to leave him is a misnomer. The idea of I think people think that because you're a shooter, you won't be helped off of. That's not true. You still have to help. If Donovan Mitchell has his man on an island and beats that guy, Max Strus's guy is going to have to come down from the corner or from the wing and help.
Just like they left JR to help, right?
Exactly. But they are going to have to close out harder and faster on Strus, and that bends your defense and gets it all out of shape. The Cavs had such a struggle getting the Knicks out of their shell defensively. And I'm really hoping that some extra shooting juice will give them that ability to get defenses out of their shell just a little bit more, because they have the on-ball destabilizers, but you need that next step where you're not record scratching when you kick it out.
Yeah. No, both Max Strus and George Niang will be left for the Cavs core. The defenses are going to still try to take away what Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are doing. You'll probably see in the playoffs The same thing that we saw with Evan Mobley, this year, where Mitchell Robinson was sagging off of him at the high post, saying, "Okay, we dare you to take a floater or take a jumper. We're going to take away your passing lanes, and we're going to impact your effectiveness as a role man and playing in the short role." Evan Mobley is going to need to develop that aspect of his game to get defenses to come up to him. He's going to need to recognize when the help is coming and find Max Strus and George Niang. That's going to need to be a very important part of his development. But I think you are on the money that even though guys are going to leave Strus, they're going to leave Niang, it's going to be different. They're going to close out harder. It's really the difference between helping off of a guy and ignoring a guy in the corner, right? That is such an important difference, because they are going to initially be with Max Strus. They're not going to be in as good position to help as they would be if it's a shooter they're flat out leaving and living with. That's not going to be the case. And even in instances where there isn't a lot of space, that willingness to shoot is going to destabilize defenses, especially coming off of movement. And that's going to open up offensive rebounding opportunities. That should be a strength as Evan Mobley and Jared Allen continue to add strength and get better. Donovan Mitchell crashes the glass. It's going to open up opportunities for someone like Isaac Okoro, if he's playing with the second unit, to crash the offensive glass, which is something he got better at as the year went along. So I do think that that's a really, really important defense. Strus isn't an elite shooter. He's a very, very good shooter, but he's a streaky shooter. And I think you pointing out, it was hot and cold in the playoffs. That's an important thing to bring up, but it's not an uncommon thing even when you're talking about elite shooters, because this is a guy that shot 36% from three prior to the NBA Finals and shot terribly in the NBA Finals. He had that 0 of 10 game. He just did not click. He did perform well. I think it was game 5 where there's a fair bit of kind of pressure on him and whatnot. But I don't think this is necessarily a reflection of his ability to perform in the playoffs, because some of the best shooters in NBA history, we see this, right? It's the whole reason why you had guys like Barkley say you can't win with a jump shooting team, because even the best jump shooters do go cold for a game or for a series. Danny Green has had 10 playoff series where he shot below 30% from three. Kyle Korver, 6. Kevin Durant, 8. Ray Allen, 8. Donovan Mitchell, 4. In fact, his obviously one of those was the Knicks. That was his 4th. That wasn't even in his bottom 3 shooting performances from 3 in a playoff series. And we know that's a guy that can shoot. And we know that's a guy that has been a big time playoff performer. It goes to show the variance, but I do think the gravity that Max Strus has is really important. Even when
Justin, I think we lost Justin. Everybody, did we lose me? That's the next question. Listeners, can you hear me right now? In the chat, what a day.
What a day indeed.
Are you here?
I'm back now.
Oh, I lost your video.
I see that.
Proceed,
stall, talk, do podcast.
This is rough stuff, everybody. We're gonna have to go full screen. While Justin, keep talking though. We'll get your camera back in here in a second.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
so
there you are. There you are.
Cut off?
What happened to
yours?
Did your internet die, bro?
My internet did not die. It just all of a sudden the USB did not recognize my microphone and apparently my camera.
You know,
technology,
guys,
man.
Happens to the best of us. Happens to the worst of us.
Just like cold shooting series happen to even the best shooters, sometimes technology will fail the best podcasters, which we are certainly not even that. So it definitely can happen to us. Where did I cut off, Carter? Gosh,
I don't even remember now. I'm so flustered. But you know what didn't let us down, Justin, is our video conference software. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Let it be known. This technical flub was not Zoom's fault. It was Justin's shoddy computer. But we're okay. We're back.
We're okay.
Let's talk about Max Strus's defense. Because I think that is, again, if we're quibbling, he's not a great defender. So what have you seen from watching Strus on that end of the ball?
Yeah, so I obviously talked to our buddies at Heatbeat and whatnot about Max Strus, and it was funny because even though he was my top free agency target, I was probably a little lower on them, lower on him than even they were. I was corrected that, you know, he's a good, not great defender. Like he's someone that's going to compete on that end. You look at the data, he's someone that does, you know, navigate screens very well defensively, but on ball, he has a lot of limitations. This isn't someone that's going to be a big time difference maker on the defensive end of the court, but you know, he's someone that's going to compete. He's going to be in position. And I think with the defensive infrastructure of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, you probably are going to feel good about him being on the court. And I think the most consistent thing with JB Bickerstaff is if the effort is there and you are where you're supposed to be, you can get beat defensively at times. But as long as you're giving that effort and you're competing on that end, you're going to continue to get minutes. And I think that was the spot we saw with Jetty, where just sometimes, you know, the focus just wasn't there, where he'd get beat on a really bad back cut or just have those type of lapses that would get him out of the rotation. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen with Strus, but I think people that are labeling him as a like flat out 3-and-D stopper, that's not the guy you're getting.
Who's labeling him as that? One thing that I find interesting about Strus is that even though he's only 6'5", he does guard up pretty well. Per Basketball Reference last year, he played 57% of his minutes at the small forward position, and another 27% at the power forward. You know, Miami played very, very small last year. That's no secret. They really only had one big they trusted, and that was Bam Adebayo. But knowing that you can survive in those lineups at the 3 and at the 4, I think is really helpful for a team that obviously is going to be playing their two guards quite a bit. I think if he's playing at the 3, you know, the onus does go up on Darius to guard point of attack point guards, and for Donnie to do his job on the defensive end as well. Like I think the big wings you can still probably throw Evan Mobley on in fits and starts. And have Strus guard a non-threatening big. You know, I'm not terrified to stash Max Strus on an Al Horford while Evan Mobley guards Jason Tatum in lineup combinations like that. But it is going to be an interesting limitation to work around. You know, something that they've really liked in the JB era is being able to have Isaac Okoro out there or a Dean Wade out there that's more of a defensive specialist, or even Karras, who, while I still don't think is an elite defender, is a solid one.
Yeah, he competed like hell.
He competed, especially on ball. I still think plenty of off ball lapses to quibble with Karras. I've been using quibble a lot today. I gotta change it up. Either way, yeah. But Strus isn't giving you what even Karras gave you on ball last year. So it's like, how willing are you to trade off, and how willing are you just to say, Evan, you got to go be a perimeter stopper, which is not probably his best utility. Like I think he's proven to be best as a free safety that can roam. But like, you know, I think those are the interesting trade-offs that come when you sub defense for offense on your roster construction.
Yeah, and this is one of those spots where I think it helps that this move was done this early in the offseason. That we kind of have an idea of what the roster is going to be, because there's still a good amount of time before we get to training camp. And if we are to assume that Max Strus is going to start at small forward for the Cavs,
which I'm not sure I'm ready to do, by the way.
I'm just saying, if you're operating under that assumption, or if you think that that's going to be a possibility, I think you're going to see the Cavs do what we asked of them at various times last year, which was kind of just trust the guys to guard their man. Trust Darius Garland to guard point guards, Mitchell shooting guards, and Strus, you know, compete and stay in position against small forwards, and that help side defense is going to be there. I'm comfortable with that, but I think that goes into the offseason plan for a guy like Darius Garland, right? Like, okay, this is going to be asked of me. I need to understand that I need to add some strength here. We're not going to be able to swap in Isaac Okoro as frequently. I think that's fair to say, because Max Strus is going to play with them a fair bit, whether it's off the bench or not. I'm going to need to add some strength because Garland has improved, I think, in a very meaningful way over the last 2 years on the defensive end. But the shortcomings come when he gets out muscled, right? When guys can kind of body him up a little bit. I think you even saw that a little bit with Jalen Brunson. He's not getting blown by. His footwork, his positioning is all sound. It's just kind of, the limitations of being someone that's 6'1", 6'2", and slight, right? So I think that goes into the offseason preparation. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm really good with that, and I think you already touched on some of the ripple effects that we might see in terms of how you can use guys like Okoro with shooting around him. But I'm very good with them kind of playing defense straight up. I think that there's enough kind of talent and length, as you mentioned. Strus is used to guarding up. Donovan Mitchell has a freakish wingspan, and Garland does a good job on point guards. When you put behind them 2 all defensive team caliber big men, I feel good about that lineup's ability to compete on the defensive end.
Yeah, I do too. Let's move to Niang, because I am just a little surprised at the, even though I would have expected the reported number to be a little lower, I'm a little surprised by people like, whoa, they really went for it. Because I just don't understand why a 6'7" power forward that played rotation minutes for what we thought was going to be a finals contender, that has shot 40% from 3 on high volume the last 3 consecutive years. I'm just a little surprised why that wouldn't be a reasonable going rate for a guy like that. I know the defense is just so. He's not a great rebounder. He is, more of a one-trick pony, even in terms of his play style than Max Strus. But that one trick's pretty darn good, man.
He's really damn good at that trick. And he's someone that does have grit. He's a competitive guy, loves to talk trash. I honestly, I haven't heard a ton of that. I know Simmons and Russillo, I think, had some sticker shock surprise. But listening to a lot of national podcasts, but this seems to be like the second year in a row where the national voice seems to be higher on the Cavs than kind of the call coming from within the house. Where I think
I'm not going to mention Lima twice on the pod.
and you know what? Let's clarify. I love Tony.
We love Lima.
He's a pot stirrer, and you know what? It's good to have
a habitual line stepper. I would say
habitual line stepper. And you know what? My favorite sports conversations are the ones where I'm arguing 99% of the time. So I'm here for it. But I think a lot of the kind of the, like, you listen to Hoop Collective, you listen to Low, Cavs are routinely coming up in kind of the offseason winners, and I think it's because they added, as you said, probably the 2 best shooters on the market when it comes to Strus and Niang. They're not perfect. They're far from it. They are still guys that will be left at times, but they're not going to be ignored, and they're guys that are willing to take those tough shots. And look at George Niang, 22nd percentile in openness rating last year. So again, defenses cover him, and he's willing to take tough shots. That's the other thing about those ratings. How tightly you're guarded isn't going to be registered unless you're actually out there taking that shot. So for Max Strus and George Niang to kind of have that consistently in their profile, it shows what willing shooters they are, even if the defense is coming up to them. 92% of his threes were catch and shoot versus pull up. That's a lot of catch and shoot jumpers, and he shot 41.2% on them, 53% from the corner.
Yeah,
we got shooters.
Yeah, I'm really excited for him. I do think from a utilization perspective, he is going to be more of a pick and pop guy, or a post up in the corner guy, in the weak side to prevent help, or even strong side to prevent help from crashing onto Darius or Donnie. I think that he is definitely more of a standstill offensive player. Like, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see a lot of highlights. You're not going to see him dashing baseline to baseline like you're going to see Max Strus. You're not going to see him run on a split cut and then up through another pin down and curl. I just don't think that's his game. But he's got a quick release. He takes them when they're open. And again, I do think he competes on the other end. I felt like in past playoff runs, they kind of went away from him prematurely, and were too worried about the defense. I think the defense is fine. I think he works hard. He's got a famously posterior that he can kind of clear out space with. And I think like the foot speed stuff is going to be relatively mitigated by the athleticism around him. I think when we're talking about Isaac Okoro running mates on the floor, I think he and Niang will be one of those 2-man pairings that has really good lineup data. Because I think some of that athleticism, you can just say, Isaac, go get the guy that's harder. Like, you know, you can kind of stash him a little bit more easily. One thing I was kind of curious in your opinion on with him is he played, I want to say, like near 90% of his minutes at the 4 last year for Philly. Would you give him run at the 3 at all for this team, knowing how many options they have there? Do you expect him to almost exclusively exist as a backup 4?
I expect him to have a very similar ratio, like 90% of his minutes coming at the power forward position, just because there is going to be a bit of a glut at the 3. And I know people dispute this. And, you know, I think if you're going to have a quibble with the Cavs off season, they didn't get a big small forward 3 and D wing because, one, that's one of the hardest things to get. And those guys aren't available for the assets that the Cavs had. But, you know, like they still do have a lot of options there, right? Like there's 96 minutes between shooting guard and small forward. You have Donovan Mitchell, who's going to eat a lot of them. Sure, he'll play some at the point guard, right? So that'll free up some. But you got Karis LeVert, you got Max Strus, and you got Isaac Okoro, who's probably going to get minutes there. You might even see maybe a little bit of George Niang. You might see a little bit of Dean Wade, right? Like, we'll see how these guys look in camp, and they're going to have their opportunities to earn minutes. But like, there are a lot of options there, and not a lot of minutes available. Like, if you're assuming Karis LeVert and Max Strus are playing 28 minutes each, and Donnie's getting 32, 33 minutes, all of a sudden you've ran up to, you know, 55, 60 minutes pretty easily. Or more than that even. Like you basically have 15 minutes left over for another option at small forward. And that probably would be Isaac Okoro, if I had to guess, right? So I think George Niang is kind of the perfect guy to put alongside Mobley and Allen as you kind of rotate them. So one of them's playing center at all times. He's really going to space the floor. I'm interested to see what that opens up. I think you're right in identifying Isaac Okoro as a guy that would really benefit from those lineups, and I'm excited to see him almost play a shooting guard. Like I think I'd almost have like Max Strus or Karis LeVert slotted in as the small forward in a lot of these lineups with George Niang, and have Okoro playing shooting guard, because we've seen so many guard to guard screens within the Cavs offense. And I like the idea of having Isaac Okoro going downhill on a spaced floor with Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland as the ball handler, seeing what he can do and growing his game in that way. That really excites me. Even if it's just in limited minutes, I think those can be really, really effective lineups. So George Niang, I think he's a better shooter than Kevin Love. I think he's a better defender. Wish the rebounding was a little stronger.
I wanted to talk about the rebounding because I think when you're looking at things that the team has not really addressed yet with any of their official moves is their kind of the fact that they had a really, really bad rebounding back half of the year, dead last in defensive rebound rate after the All-Star break, certainly dead last in the playoffs in defensive rebound rate. And if you're looking for something that Niang does really well, it's not rebounding. Even though playing 90% of his minutes at the 4, he only averaged 4 defensive rebounds per 36. They are going to still have to work to gang rebound when he's on the floor. That's one thing that kind of interests me about him at the 3. And I do think if you play him a little more at the 3 than he played in Philly, I do think you can reap some rewards of the switchability of Mobley and Allen and how well they guard on the perimeter. The sense that, you know, you can still stash him on a big who's not particularly threatening. But I do wonder if you could stagnate a little bit. I remember when Philly played that Mondo lineup with Tobias Harris, Al Horford, and Embiid. Even though Harris and Horford were quote unquote shooters, they were both standstill shooters. They weren't movement shooters. And I do worry that, you know, given that Niang is such a catch and shoot, just a pick and pop guy, not a baseline to baseline kind of runner, that you could get a little slow footed out there. But I still am interested in seeing them try, you know. of finding ways just to get that extra spacing on the floor. If you want to play the two bigs together, like, would I hate a Darius Strus, Niang, Mobley Allen lineup? No, I think it would be interesting. So I think JB is just going to have so many toys to play with from a lineup perspective. Where, and that was a big gripe I had with the postseason was like, what the hell is he supposed to do? He's only got 6 guys he trusts. So, like, there's not that many different combinations you can cobble together with 6 guys.
Right. And you couldn't even put Lamar in, right? Because Lamar wasn't a strong rebounder, and that was one of their worst rebounding lineups. Like, you look at the defensive rebounding percentage for George Niang, it's not great. It's 1% better than Karis LeVert. Max Strus, slightly better rebounder than Jetty Osman. So, it's marginal, but that's probably going to need to be one of those areas where you get that internal improvement, right? That Evan Mobley adds some strength.
Another year of weight room. Jarrett, another year of weight room.
Yeah, Isaac Okoro, another year weight room. I think one of the biggest things I want to see is I think this is a situation that's more conducive to Okoro being that glue guy that fills in everything. He's going to need to be a stocks guy. He's going to need to be a guy that gets rebounds, that does the other things, that plays as a connector. This is the type of roster that he needs to do that. And honestly, Carter, I think from just a roster balance standpoint, I think I'm starting Max Strus on this team, and I'm having Okoro come in off the bench because I think he's going to have more spacing to play with. And even from developmental reps, from that standpoint, I think there's going to be more opportunity for him with the second unit. And considering the fact, it looks like the roster is kind of set as it is. Obviously, something can change. I'm sure the Cavs are always going to look at options. Developing Isaac Okoro is really important. Like, the internal growth and maximizing the opportunities for all of these guys is really, really important. And I think a spaced out second unit that's pushing the pace, that has a guy like George Niang, running to the corners, Evan Mobley getting up and down the court because he's usually the second unit big, Darius Garland out there, along with either, Max Strus or Karis LeVert. I think those are lineups that can really utilize the cutting and skills that Okoro has, his great ability to finish at the rim, his growing, improvements as a screener. I think you can use him in creative ways. And I think there's just more personnel to allow this team to be more creative on the offensive end. And that's always been something that I've enjoyed with JB, is when the team has added more talent. I think the offense has gotten more creative and they've added wrinkles, but there just hasn't been a whole kind of infusion of that. And I think this is finally a roster where we're going to be able to properly evaluate that. We're going to see if that growth continues with the improved personnel, or if you have to, look at other options to improve, whether it's, challenging players to perform different roles, or making schematic changes, collaborating with the coaching staff, whatever the case may be. I think we can feel a lot better about the options that JB's going to have at his disposal. And the track record so far says that he's going to make improvements along with that change.
Absolutely, buddy. And I'm really excited to see the way Niang fits, but I'm also really geeked about Ty Jerome.
You nerd.
I know. Year 2 in a row of Kobe chasing a player to fill out the rotation that is a bit of a pet cat. I just think Jerome does some really cool stuff for this team. And I just think he's kind of a chameleon on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. When you're a 6'5" point guard who can shoot, it's really easy to fit wherever you go. Something that, I was thinking about Jerome's fit on this team, and I kind of landed on a funky comparison from Cavs past that is pretty flawed, but there are enough through lines that I thought it was worth making. Remember how nice it was to have Dante Exum come in with Sexton and Garland? Being able to have a big guard that had a little bit of playmaking chops, that could defend up to the two guard position, but still be a connector. And obviously Dante was, on his way out of the league at that point. And by the way, congrats, he's back. Mavs signed him. Jerome, I think, can kind of do that for the two small guards in this Cavs backcourt, where he can add, he can run the offense, but he can also just as easily play off Donnie or Darius and be a really nice connector and secondary playmaker, and a great catch and shoot player. He's got a weird basketball reference page, Justin. It's like he shoots 28% from three one year, then he shoots 38, then he shoots 29, then he shoots 41, and it's like I don't know what to make of the jumper from looking at it.
Clearly we're talking about a sub 30% 3-point percentage next year, because that's just the pattern.
Yeah, I have it in front of me now. 28% is rookie year, then up to 42% the next year, all in high volume, by the way. Never below 5 3-point attempts per 36. So 28.
Speaking of weird basketball,
then 42. Hold on. 28, then 42, then 29, then 39. So I don't know, man.
Speaking of weirdness on his page, do you want to scroll up and tell us his nickname on Basketball Reference?
Oh, man. Milk? What?
I don't know.
Can't believe that didn't make it into the Cavs announcement tweet. Yeah, I
milk in a minivan, baby.
Milk in a minivan.
Shopping.
How about it? Yeah, I really like his game. I think he's a smart, heady player. I think his inclusion kind of says that the Cavs he kind of feels like a nice break glass in case of emergency option if Rubio does not bounce back. He is entering his age 26 season, which is kind of nice. You know, the Cavs have been filling out the ends of their roster, typically guys later in their careers, where they're there for teaching and training and to be called on in spot moments, but maybe not, you know, even as the world's preeminent Raul Neto fan, I knew he wasn't going to be like a 4-year player for the Cavs.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Ty Jerome is going to be that for this team, but the chances are much higher. And so I really like that. And I think that in a world where Rubio does not have enough juice moving forward, he is a really, really capable backup guard that can play. Even I think he could earn rotation minutes even if the team is healthy, but especially if they're not healthy. If a guard, happens to get punched in the face 37 times in a season, he could come in and give them real minutes. So I'm excited about the signing.
The Warriors had a better record without Steph, and a big part of that was, him stepping in, and this is probably why the Warriors went out and actually got themselves a point guard this offseason. Kidding.
Well, honestly, I think he'd be back with the Warriors if they didn't happen to add Chris Paul. The positional need just wasn't there anymore. But he gave them good minutes. We talked with a few Warriors fan friends, and they were like, "Yeah, he's a smart player that was able to play off of Steph or initiate offense." And we've compared Darius and Steph quite a bit over the years in terms of like the way that we think they can impact the game on and off ball. And I think the fit is pretty darn clean here. And again, I would not be surprised to see him get minutes. I really think it's going to come down to how big the Cavs want to play rotationally. I think that 9th/10th rotation spot is going to be an interesting battle between Rubio, Wade, and Jerome.
Agreed.
I think all of them have a real shot at earning minutes. And really, you could probably honestly throw Okoro into that. I wouldn't, but you could. I think Okoro is. I would be stunned if Okoro is not in the rotation on opening night. So I wouldn't throw him in. But like, I think that pretty much past the 8th spot, where you have really past 7, you have the core 4, you have Niang, you have Levert, you have Strus. I think all 7 of those guys, no doubt, getting minutes. 8 and on is going to be, I think, a real dogfight, because I think they have a lot of really helpful players that could fill minutes in those spots, which is really nice. Like, again, I really wanted I wanted JB to be able to have 8 guys that he really trusted in the postseason, and maybe 10 in the regular season. I think they're way better set up for that than they were just a few months ago.
Yeah, I think it's important that Ty Jerome, Niang, like, those are guys that the fan bases they're leaving are like, you guys are going to really like them. These are, Jerome's able to step in. He's able to play either guard position. his assist to turnover ratio is over 4. Like, that's fantastic. Like, he takes really good care of the ball. And as you mentioned, like, he play with either guard, and that's again one of the nice things about Darius Garland. Like, there just seems, when it comes to young point guards in the league, there's not a lot of them that can play both on and off ball, and it just goes to show like how malleable his game is, how easy he makes roster building, because he is so damn good at playing off of ball, right? Like, even last year, I mentioned that 32% of Max Strus's shots came off of screens. 27% came off of Garland. Like, he's someone that was playing as a movement shooter. Also, 42% for Donovan Mitchell. Eesh. He was really running around out there. But, like, that gives me confidence that they're going to be able to utilize that skill set with Strus and Niang. And to have another ball handler to take advantage of these off-ball movements and actions that the Cavs can have, that's a really nice advantage. And Max Strus, I felt good about, the people that cover the team saying, you know what, he's better than you think. Was happy for him, whatnot, makes sense. We're going after Dame and whatnot. Obviously, the general reaction is going to be a little bit lower on him just because he shot so poorly in the last series they played. But we've seen that fans can get a little irrational when players on their team don't perform well in the playoffs. I think there's a few very good Cavs players that didn't play so well against the Knicks that I'm pretty confident are still very good players that can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think before we wrap, I just kind of want to talk about the general volume of 3-point shooting that the team added. Because when you look, one of the reasons I think we grump so hard at Darius for his relatively low 3-point rate compared to his ability is that there was no road to attempts otherwise. It was like, hey, Darius and Donnie, if you don't combine for 17 threes, we're not getting past 30 tonight. And like, that was really hard. It's really hard to win the math, to win games in the NBA when you're losing the math problem. And most of the time they lost the math problem. And for a team that hangs its hat on the defensive end, that you were really beholden to the variance on low volume nights. Last year, among rotation players that actually finished the year on the team, so I'm not counting Kevin Love, Donovan Mitchell led the team in 3-point attempts per 36 minutes at 9.4. Jetty was up next at 7.3. Darius was next at 6.1. Max Strus took 8.9 threes per 36. Georges Niang took 9.1 threes per 36 minutes. So just swapping out low usage, low volume 3-point minutes for high volume 3-point minutes is just going to do so much for the variance of this team. There's a reason why it was so noteworthy that all the Cavaliers the last 2 years started with Jetty getting hot. Because when you have rotation players who can bomb from 3, and it's a regular season night in February, and everyone's tired, and they really only read the first couple pages of the Scout, and it was mostly about the stars, then that's when you get those kind of bombs away kind of nights where all of a sudden you're up 30. Yeah. I just don't think we are understanding enough the difference from how the court is going to look and feel. I don't think we're acknowledging it to the extent we should. This Cavs team had a top 10 offense in the regular season with 2 bona fide shooters that played all year on the roster. I got to ask you, where do you expect that offense to land this year, knowing that you got a year of growth from your core and you've actually added some actual bona fide spacing in the form of volume shooters in Strus and Niang?
I'm going to give you a really boring answer.
You always give me boring answers when I ask these, like, give me a rank, you asshole questions.
Yeah, but
you don't like them.
Oh no, I'm giving you a rank, but I'm going to do a little bit of fence sitting here. I think it's going to be around 7th, like 5 through 7, kind of in that range. But I think that's going to be more the result of this team's going to be good enough to sit guys, and their best lineups the offensive ratings of those best lineups are going to be a lot better than it was last year. I think they're going to be more explosive. I think they're going to be able to get out and transition a little bit more with the guys they have. I mean, one of the quickest ways to up your pace is pull up threes in transition. And these guys are going to go out there and take those type of shots. And we've seen the effect that can have on opposing teams, right? Like if you're bombing away and you're hitting those shots, you start rushing them, right? And you're rushing them into a set, very good half-court defense and generating turnovers and stuff off of that. So I think that they're going to be very improved, and their core lineups are going to have an even better offensive rating than they had last year, which is saying a bit because they had pretty damn good offensive lineups. I just think overall, you're probably going to have a little bit more downtime. You have depth that you can use throughout the regular season. You can rest guys when they are a little bit banged up. And I thought your point about the lack of shooting, if Garland and Mitchell don't have it, is a really important one, because you look at that January where they went 500. Garland's dealing with a hand injury to his shooting hand. Mitchell's dealing with a groin injury, and he dealt with a hand injury later on in that season, right? Like there were kind of those little bruises and injuries, lingering issues that impacted their ability to kind of fire away as they did when they were fully healthy. And there's just more options now to go out and take those shots. So I do think that the offense is going to be improved. I just think the overall ranking, I think it'll probably be around the same range. It's just going to be a kind of a more sustainable version of it.
That's fair. I will buy that take. You did mention minutes as well. I do think with this, many bodies that you really want to play, I'm interested to see how JB kind of parcels out the rotation. There were times he was playing a 7-man rotation in the regular season.
Yeah.
Last year. And I've talked a lot about having 4, quote unquote core players that you really, really believe in. Makes it hard to have a 9 or 10-man rotation because you want to give those guys 35 minutes in games that you're trying to win that are important. I'm interested to see how deep in the rotation JB is willing to go this year, and if you can get Allen down to like a 30-minute a game. Like think about how much more impact he gets to have if he's playing 3 or 4 less minutes and can really really exert more and not have to hold anything in reserve because he has to play 40 minutes in a postseason game. Those are the kind of things I'm interested to see. The roster is still imperfect. I think if you were hoping to come out of this offseason with a no doubt perfect playoff starter at 3, you didn't get that. Oubre would have probably been that. I think he probably, if they had gone the Oubre route, I probably would have started him. Shooting woes be damned, and you would have felt more confident in your top 6 and definitely your closing 5. But I still think Kobe addressed this offseason the way I wanted him to. The only thing, I think it's one of those things where maybe at an individual level, you give every one of these deals. I don't know if I'd give any of them better than a B or a B plus, but the aggregate of them, I would give like an A minus, because of what I think they do for the team. So I talk a lot about how basketball is about a team becoming more than the sum of their parts. I think this offseason was a more than the sum of their parts offseason. And I'm really, really excited to see how they impact everyone around them.
Yeah, I'd probably give it a B plus. I think A grades are always kind of reserved for star level moves. But I thought they did a great job with the options that they have, and really what the Cavs added was seasoning. Like the core parts of your meal need to be great. Great quality. You need Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. You need those guys to play well. If they're not playing well, none of these moves are going to bail you out. But I do think that what they do well can be enhanced by the guys that they added. And it's still going to come down to that internal development. That is still the absolute most important thing. As I said, if defenses are sagging off of Evan Mobley and not respecting him even at the free throw line come playoffs, they're going to have some issues once again. That's still Evan Mobley's growth in that spot. We talked about it all last year. Given what defenses can do in the playoffs against small guards, You need a front court initiator. And on this roster, that has to be Evan Mobley. That's probably one of the most important things. But I think it's going to be harder for defenses to cheat to the extent that they did, given the guys that the Cavs added. I think there's more functional depth. I think guys aren't going to be as tired throughout the regular season. Not that the Cavs were like near the top of the league in minutes played, but like you said, there were some nights where there's a really, really short rotation. They were dealing with a lot of stuff. They really played hard. I just think that it's going to be a less difficult regular season on their bodies because of the guys that they added.
Absolutely, buddy. I'm really, really excited. You know what else I'm excited for before we wrap? Summer League, baby!
Oh my God.
Starts tomorrow. A roster full. I've never in my Cavaliers fandom seen a roster this full of dudes I have heard of and care about. Normally we're like 3 deep, and we got 2 starters where I'm like, who the hell is that guy? I'm just going to count them off. We got Amani Bates. We got Craig Porter Jr. We got Luke Travers. We got Khalifa Diop. We've got Sharif Cooper. We got Isaiah Mobley. We've got I'm forgetting someone now. God, Sam Merrill. I got all 7. The 7 guys that the Cavs have, invested second round picks or have been in the Charge organization and played really, really well, or have on 2 ways, or we have Pete Nance. There's 8. A lot of guys that I'm really excited to see play ball. I think that even from a getting ready for the season standpoint, it's really cool that Bates and Travers get to go up against each other in summer league camp. Talk about the stuff Bates needs to work on. Travers is right there as kind of that gritty guy that's going to challenge him with size and athleticism and length. Porter Jr. and Sharif Cooper camp battles sound real fun to me. Mm-hmm. The stuff the team has shared looks really, really good. It's going to be a really informative summer league because we talked when we had Adam Spinell on for the post draft pod about how when you have there are 6 guys on the summer league roster that are either reportedly on 2 ways or could be 2-way players, or the team is expended draft capital on, or are currently under contract with the team. And the odds are, if you get one of those guys to be a rotation roster member on a team that has title aspirations in the next couple years, that's a huge win. If Isaiah Mobley hits, if Travers hits, if Diop hits, and become guys you can count on, that's awesome. And what I'm going into the summer league looking for is who's that one? Who's showing the signs? Who looks ready to make it up to the big club and play minutes right now on a team? I really think the odds are, even though the odds are long for any of them individually, I think collectively there's a really good shot that they'll find someone.
I'm also just excited to see, Isaiah Mobley in a summer league setting where there's a point guard he actually played with last year, Sharif Cooper, right? Last year, it was RJ Nembhard essentially running point guard and, going out trying to get his own contract. The fact that he's got, Craig Porter Jr., who's a great, pick and roll ball handler that's going to be able to utilize him. Sharif Cooper, who he obviously has a lot of experience with. Sam Merrill, who he has the experience with.
A good role guy in Diop who looks, man, the frame is really good on that guy. Big. It's not surprising that this guy got drafted as a project because the frame looks amazing.
Yeah, and he's so light on his feet too. I watch kind of the highlights of him moving around out there, and you look, okay, mobile big man that's got touch, light on his feet, can catch. That's that gets you a role in the NBA. So it'd be really nice if one or more of these guys eventually panned out for the Cavs, especially projecting forward. Like you said, in a couple of years, cap situation is going to get interesting, right? I think if you're going to be a contending team, I think at some point we expect the Cavs to kind of sprint into that luxury tax, right? And I think the Mobley extension is probably going to be that point, if I had to guess. Finding these cheap guys, these late round picks, developing them and having those guys as part of the rotation is going to be so important. We talked about it with Phoenix even, right? Signing a bunch of rotation
players.
Heck of an
off season for them.
Yeah, hell of an offseason for them. Signing rotation players on these contracts is so important when you do go over that luxury tax, and if you go over the second apron, because you have to get more exact when it comes to salary matching, right? Like, you won't have the mid-level exception, so your mid-level exception might be trading a guy that you already have on your roster for someone else that just kind of fits a little bit better. And I think the Cavs are setting themselves up well for that kind of optionality.
Absolutely, buddy. I want to keep talking about free agency, but we got to save ourselves some content for the rest of the summer, man.
We really do. I mean, I didn't even prepare a 60 seconds of Sea Bears because I just,
oh man,
there's too much to talk
Don't
about.
let it. We can't let that die on the vine, though. That's 2 pods in a row.
Yeah,
and God knows the people who definitely exist are asking for Sea Bears, buddy.
There's got to be at least 5 of them.
Just real quick, how's the season going? We don't have to throw this timer on. How's the season going? You still at the top of the league?
Top of the West, 8-5. There's a team out west that's 9-5. Awesome game, last home game against Niagara. To look at that clock, the last game against Niagara was awesome. They were down 16, came all the way back. Massive performance from Teddy Allen and the boys to pull off the win in that one. Lost back-to-back games on the road, so I'm a little bummed out about that. No home games until Tuesday next week. That kind of sucks, but most of the season's underway. Number 1 in the West, feeling good about it. Feel good about their ability to make the playoffs, and let's make something happen. Let's win it in our first year. Go Bears!
Thank you very much.
Hey, wow, that really came down to the wire. That was a little lackadaisical stroll through 60 seconds of Sea Bears. Thank you, Carter, for forcing me to do that. And thank you to our listeners that tuned in, supported us, dealt with our technical difficulties today. We really appreciate all you guys. Big thanks to everyone on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.